شكرا.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the beginning, I would like to congratulate you and members of your bureau and wish you all the success in your duties. I emphasize that we are fully ready to cooperate and work with you in a manner that guarantees the respect for the principle of equality between member states and to achieve the purposes of our organization. I would like to begin by affirming that we support the initiatives of the Secretary General and his efforts together with USG Vladimir Voronkov in order to enhance the role of the organization in counterterrorism. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the non-aligned movement. I would like to deliver the following observations in my national capacity, and allow me, in this context, to present part of the bitter experience lived by my country and my people throughout the last 7 years as a result of an irresponsible and serious political decision taken by some member state governments in order to dedicate their energies and resources and violent extremist ideologies to support armed terrorist groups in my country, Syria. Mr. Chairman, it has become a given fact that Security Council resolutions on counterterrorism, some of which were issued under Chapter 7, and they have reached around 16 resolutions until now, they do not find a path towards implementation. Similarly, the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy will not become reality on the ground. Nor can member states agree on a standard legal definition of terrorism, which has been a Syrian request since 1986. Nor can member states succeed in negotiating a binding, comprehensive, and global convention on counterterrorism. I declare, dear colleagues, none of this can succeed so long as the head of the snake remains in place. The masterminds remain in place. This snake head is represented by policies of member states in this organization. States that enjoy the power and influence and wealth, but they do not enjoy the values of good governance that deter it from abusing its capacities in imposing hegemony and waging war and arming terrorists in any country that disagrees with these governments. These governments still view armed terrorist groups and foreign terrorist fighters as an economic, military, and political weapon that can be used to overthrow legitimate governments and to destroy state economies and capacities and to kill their citizens and displace them as refugees and displaced persons and to send them to death at sea. Then shedding tears on their lives. And in speaking of foreign terrorist fighters, allow me to present an explanation, a simplified explanation of their recruitment process. They were citizens of more than 100 nationalities around the world, as affirmed by the report of the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team issued as document S/2015/358. They were normal people who were influenced and misled by schools and religious centers funded by billions of oil and gas money in order to promote extremist terrorist Wahhabi ideology in different parts of the world under the cover of religious work However, with a takfiri, Daeshi angle. Naturally, many state governments of member states in this organization, and particularly in the European Union, placed these individuals under surveillance, being dangerous individuals who threaten society's security, until narrow political interests have converged with the corruption of some of these states' governments. These individuals were exploited and sent to fight in Syria and Iraq in order to, on one hand, spread terrorism, and second, to rid Western societies of their presence. As such, foreign terrorist fighters began, as the UN calls them, began to flow into Syria through a well-planned process which involved governments and intelligence agencies. Tens of thousands of passports were issued and tourist visa entries into countries neighboring Syria and Iraq. Air flights and itineraries were devised by government intelligence agencies in order to make them untraceable. Some terrorists were even forced to travel through more than 5 international airports on the same day. This is documented in Interpol reports and in UN counterterrorism entities. As for weapons and training camps and operations rooms were ready in the countries surrounding Syria and Iraq, waiting to receive these terrorists whom have been labeled as the moderate armed opposition. This is, of course, an opposition that has been genetically modified because they are foreigners, but we are requested to call them moderate armed Syrian opposition. The involved governments and their intelligence officers supervised this process, who have secured their arrival in Syria. Then some of these governments were involved in illegal trade in oil and Syrian artifacts from Iraq and Syria. On top of all of this, some member state governments ignored what is happening on the internet, on social networks, by way of spreading extremist ideology and calls to hate and bear arms, and to fund and donate to terrorists in Syria and Iraq by calling them mujahideen. And so increased arrival of terrorist fighters have been facilitated to Syria and Iraq until today. Encrypted messages are used to wage terrorist attacks everywhere on earth. Mr. Chairman, what I have presented now is only an example of our suffering through 7 years of terrorism, but it proves a fact that an influential segment of the international community still lacks the political will to combat terrorism. What we demand, ladies and gentlemen, is real political will to combat terrorism and to hold its supporters and financiers accountable. More precisely, we want to cut off the snake's head and not only to chase after its tail. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the permanent representative of Syria for his statement and now give the floor to the representative